A police officer spilled coffee on a black man and mockingly told him to get out of the way, unaware that the man was his new boss. This encounter exposed systemic racism, personal prejudices, and ultimately led to the officer's downfall. The events that followed shocked even the most seasoned observers. But let's start at the beginning. The police station buzzed like a hive on a busy morning. Phones ringing, officers exchanging jokes, and an underlying tension hinting at an important meeting. Officer Ryan Callahan, a white man in his early 40s, rushed into the precinct, late for the briefing. In his hand was an oversized coffee cup, his lifeline amidst the chaos. Distracted by his phone, he failed to notice the man standing in his path. The man, tall and imposing, was black and around 45 years old. His perfectly tailored navy suit highlighted his confident stance. With neatly trimmed hair and polished black shoes, he stood out in a place dominated by casual uniforms and an air of controlled disorder. The man's name was Jordan Blake, though no one yet knew he was the station's new commanding officer. "Hey, watch it!" Jordan said as Callahan collided with him, spilling hot coffee on his pristine jacket. Callahan didn't apologize. "Oh, sorry, or not. Who are you anyway?" "This isn't a place for visitors," he said irritably, giving Jordan a dismissive glance. Jordan calmly pulled out a handkerchief and began dabbing the coffee stains off his jacket. "Visitors? We'll see about that, officer," he replied, his voice calm but icy. Unbothered, Callahan walked off, muttering over his shoulder, "Watch where you're going, pal." The exchange caught the attention of several officers nearby. Some chuckled, others exchanged puzzled glances. No one intervened or asked who the man was, but the tension in the room became palpable. As Callahan hurried to his desk, Jordan remained standing, surveying the room. His gaze lingered on the officers, the walls adorned with awards, and the bustling energy of the precinct. This moment was significant for him. He wasn't just here to lead. He was here to transform a culture that had long turned a blind eye to racial biases. Deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. By noon, an unexpected meeting was called, throwing the station into a flurry of speculation. The briefing room filled with murmurs and quiet laughter, but silence fell as Captain Harris, a graying man in his 60s, stepped up to the podium. His demeanor was unusually solemn. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harris began, "today marks a new chapter. I'm retiring, and this station has a new commanding officer. Please welcome Chief Jordan Blake." A stunned silence enveloped the room. The officers' faces reflected a mix of surprise, confusion, and disbelief, especially among those who had witnessed the morning's incident. Jordan stepped forward confidently, his sharp gaze sweeping the room. He noticed it all: the unease, the covert resentment, and even a faint air of defiance. His eyes landed on Callahan, who sat with his arms crossed and an expression of thinly veiled irritation. Callahan muttered to his partner, "Great, another reformer." Jordan caught it. "Officer Callahan," he said sharply, causing the room to stir. "Is there something you'd like to share?" "No, sir," Callahan replied reluctantly. "Just happy to meet the new boss." Jordan raised an eyebrow but continued. "Good to hear. Now, everyone, listen carefully," he said, his tone firm. "My mission here is straightforward: to restore community trust and uphold integrity. That means no tolerance for misconduct, abuse of power, or bias. I expect professionalism. If anyone has a problem with that, the door is open." The room was heavy with silence once again, this time more oppressive. Some exchanged wary glances, while Callahan clenched his jaw, barely concealing his frustration. Deep down, he knew the new boss would be trouble for him. Jordan concluded his speech with authority. "You're dismissed. Let's get to work. We have a lot to do." As the officers dispersed, Callahan lingered, his eyes narrowing as he studied Jordan with growing hostility. It was a silent challenge, and Jordan accepted it wordlessly, knowing that this officer would likely be his first major test. In the weeks following Jordan's appointment, changes swept through the precinct. His presence was felt everywhere: surprise inspections, revised protocols, and a transparent system for handling complaints. He scrutinized operations meticulously, poring over reports, speaking with citizens, and listening to officers. He anticipated resistance, and he was right. For officers accustomed to the old ways, the changes felt like an attack on their routine. Callahan was among the loudest detractors. "This is all for show," he grumbled to his partner Jim in the break room. "What does he know about the streets? Paperwork and equality speeches won't make them safer." Jordan was aware of the grumblings and even the derogatory nicknames circulating behind his back. Some officers called him a token chief, a not-so-subtle reference to his race. Yet he remained composed, refusing to be distracted from his mission. The tipping point came when Jordan initiated an audit of complaints against officers. The findings were damning. A significant number of unwarranted arrests disproportionately targeted minorities, and most complaints had been systematically ignored. In a tense meeting, Jordan addressed the findings head-on. "What I've uncovered cannot be ignored," he said, standing before a room of grim-faced officers. "These patterns of bias don't just undermine public trust. They threaten the integrity of this department. From now on, every complaint will be thoroughly investigated, and those responsible will be held accountable." Callahan, seated in the back row, couldn't hold back his anger. "This is insane! Are we supposed to second-guess every decision we make just to avoid being called racist?" he barked. Jordan's gaze locked onto him. "Officer, if your decisions violate the law or people's rights, then yes, you should think twice. Now sit down and listen." The meeting ended in uneasy silence. While some officers began to see the necessity of reform, others like Callahan dug in their heels. That night, Callahan gathered a small group of like-minded officers, urging them to resist the changes. "We can't let him tear apart everything we've built," he argued. "Who's with me?" A few nodded, but many stayed silent, unsure whether Callahan's defiance was worth the risk. Meanwhile, Jordan continued meeting with community members, showing them that real change was underway. His determination earned him both allies and adversaries, but he remained steadfast, knowing the battle for justice was far from over. Tensions in the precinct reached a boiling point. A complaint was filed against Callahan for using excessive force on a black teenager accused of theft. Witnesses claimed the boy had done nothing wrong, but Callahan had reportedly said, "They're all the same." Jordan summoned him to his office. "Officer Callahan, explain your actions," he demanded. Callahan entered with forced confidence, but his irritation was evident. "Just a misunderstanding, Chief. The kid looked suspicious, so I did my job. Everything's by the book." Jordan held up the complaint report. "By the book? Do you have any proof he committed a crime?" Callahan snapped. "You're always taking their side. Maybe you don't belong here if you don't understand how the streets work." Jordan rose, his calm demeanor unshaken. "The streets are where we serve, officer, not where we impose. You're suspended pending investigation." Fuming, Callahan stormed out, threatening, "This isn't over." But it was. Investigators uncovered damning evidence against Callahan: falsified reports, racist comments, and multiple protocol violations. Jordan invited media and legal observers to ensure transparency, and the scandal became public knowledge. Callahan was dismissed in disgrace, while Jordan rallied the remaining officers. "Our duty is to the community," he reminded them. "If you can't uphold these values, you don't belong here." Though some officers left, most stayed, inspired by Jordan's unwavering leadership. Over time, the precinct transformed, becoming a model of accountability and fairness. As Jordan walked past Callahan's empty desk one day, he reflected on the victory. It was just the beginning, but it proved that justice could prevail, even against entrenched resistance.